The creepiest urban legends that turned out to be true. Welcome back to the dark side of history. We've all heard the stories whispered at sleepovers, the friend of a friend accounts that make our skin crawl. We usually dismiss them as folklore, a way for our brains to process the bumps in the night. But what happens when the campfire story doesn't end when the sun comes up? What happens when the monster under the bed has a police file and a fingerprint record? Tonight, we aren't just exploring myths, we are diving into the horrifying moments where the veil between urban legend and cold, hard reality completely vanished. Grab your headphones and dim the lights. These are the urban legends that turned out to be true. The legend of the body under the bed. It's the ultimate travel nightmare. You check into a budget motel, exhausted from a long drive. The room looks clean enough, but there's a smell, a heavy, sickly sweet odor that air freshener just can't mask. You assume it's sold pipes or a previous guest's leftovers. You sleep on that bed for a night, maybe two. Finally, the stench becomes unbearable. You call maintenance. They lift the mattress, and your blood turns to ice. There, tucked inside the box spring, is a human corpse. For decades, this was considered a classic urban legend designed to keep teenagers away from seedy motels. But in reality, this has happened dozens of times. One of the most famous cases occurred in 2003 at the Capri Motel in Kansas City. A man checked into room 107 and complained about a foul odor. He actually stayed in the room for 3 nights before the management finally investigated. When they lifted the mattress, they found a body in an advanced state of decomposition. The horror here isn't just the discovery, it's the realization of the intimacy you shared with the deceased. You slept, breathed, and dreamed inches away from a scene of a crime. It turns the bed, the ultimate symbol of safety, into a tomb. The real-life Halloween prop. We've all seen them. Those hyper-realistic Halloween decorations that look a little too convincing. Usually, it's just high-quality latex and a creative homeowner. But the legend says that one year, a prop hanging from a tree or sitting on a porch was actually a real person, and the neighbors walked by for days, waving at a corpse. Tragically, this happened in Frederica, Delaware, in 2005. On a Tuesday morning in October, a woman was found hanging from a tree near a busy road. Because it was the spooky season, dozens of people walked and drove past her for over 3 hours. They didn't call the police because they genuinely thought it was a grimly creative holiday prank. It wasn't until someone noticed the prop wasn't swaying like plastic should that the authorities were called. The line between a holiday scare and a human tragedy had blurred so much that no one bothered to help until it was far too late. The collector of human dolls. There is a subgenre of horror focused on creepy dolls. The legend usually involves an eccentric recluse whose house is filled with life-sized dolls that look eerily human. In the story, the twist is always that the dolls are preserved people. In 2011, the world learned the name Anatoly Moskvin, a brilliant Russian historian and linguist. Moskvin was known as an expert on local cemeteries. However, when his parents visited his apartment, they discovered a house of horrors. Moskvin had dug up the remains of 26 young girls and brought them home. He didn't just keep them, he mummified them using salt and baking soda, then dressed them in stockings, dresses, and makeup. He even placed music boxes inside their chest cavities so they could sing. He lived with these dolls for years, having tea parties and celebrating their birthdays. It is a story that proves the human mind can be far more terrifying than any ghost story ever written. The fragging nightmare. The person in the walls. Have you ever felt like you were being watched in your own home? Maybe a door you left open is now closed, or the milk is disappearing faster than you remember. The legend of the hidden roommate suggests that a stranger is living in your attic or crawl space, coming out only when you sleep. This phenomenon is called frogging, and it is terrifyingly real. In 2008, a man in Japan became so suspicious of his disappearing food that he installed security cameras. He expected to see a burglar. Instead, he saw a woman sliding out of the top shelf of his closet. She had been living there for a year, undetected, using his shower and eating his food while he was at work. In another case in Ohio, a group of college students found a secret door behind a removable wall in their basement. Inside was a fully furnished bedroom with a television and clothes. A man had been living in their house for months, using a spare key he had found. The scariest part, he knew their names and their schedules. The Candyman and the poison treats every Halloween. Parents checked their children's candy for needles or poison. For years, experts called this Halloween sadism a myth with no basis in reality. They said no stranger had ever actually poisoned a random child's candy. While the stranger part remains largely a myth, the legend of the poisoned candy became a horrific reality in 1974 because of a man named Ronald Clark O'Brien. In an attempt to collect life insurance money, O'Brien laced pixie sticks with cyanide. He gave them to his own children and 3 others to cover his tracks, making it look like a madman in the neighborhood was responsible. His son, Timothy, tragically passed away. This single, calculated act of evil solidified a global urban legend that changed the way we celebrate Halloween forever. Closing thoughts. Why we keep telling them. Why do we tell these stories if they're so upsetting? Perhaps because urban legends act as a social immune system. They warn us of the dangers that exist in the fringes of society. But as we've seen tonight, sometimes those dangers aren't in the fringes, they're in the room we just rented, the house we live in, or the decorations we pass on the street. The next time you hear a story that sounds too wild to be true, take a second look, because sometimes the truth isn't just stranger than fiction, it's much, much darker.